Welcome, everyone. My name is Clinton Johnson. I'm a solution architect at Esri, where I lead the Racial Equity Initiative. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Jacqueline Scott, an account manager for local government, Piali Kundu, a solution engineer primarily supporting local government, Marina Kamal, a partner technical advisor with our professional services division, and Margot Bordney, an account manager and member of our Racial Equity Initiative. And Margot will also pop in at the end to help us out with some questions. Today, we want to share some of the capabilities Esri's been evolving. We're talking about tools to support you, our customers, working to address one of the world's toughest challenges. We recognize that jurisdictions, not just in the US, but worldwide, have been working to address racial inequities and social injustices in their communities, and we're here to help. So as a part of this event, you'll get prompted to respond to a survey when you exit the webinar. Please take some time to fill that out. In just a few minutes, you can share input that will influence the data, the guidance, and all the other resources that we're looking to provide to you. We know that people in cities, countries, municipal councils, villages, provinces, boroughs all around the world are trying to live healthy and successful lives. And yet, far too many are plagued by a wide range of inequities across a broad spectrum of topics. And Esri has long provided spatial data to help users to explore, understand, and confront these issues. Like how the W.K. Kellogg Foundation used spatial data to assess Black women's access to healthcare in New Orleans, and how Territorial Empathy in New York used maps, animations, and audio to show the impact of COVID-19 on communities over time. We all recognize that these inequities are also intrinsically and structurally related, and as such, create a wide range of experiences and outcomes for people across your communities. And Esri has long provided a wide and growing array of techniques and tools to help you to understand and unravel those interrelated concerns, to address barriers to equality, and to design more equitable outcomes. But we find ourselves in a particular moment. In the wake of a string of high-profile killings of unarmed Black people, culminating in the killing of George Floyd, and amid a global pandemic that's revealing a wide range of racial inequities, leading to a wide range of disparities in how COVID-19 is impacting Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian communities, including disproportionate health outcomes, challenges for children getting educated in increasingly online environments, and racial inequities in wage loss and business outcomes. So under Jack Dangermond's leadership, Esri is doing what it does best. We're working to help all of you doing very important work to address long-standing injustices, to find the best opportunities to leverage GIS and location intelligence to drive racial justice. Towards that end, we've begun by providing guidance and resources to help all of you map and understand racial inequity, providing a racial equity hub that includes examples of how organizations have used GIS to advance racial equity, and curating and sharing relevant data to help you all visualize and analyze inequities in your jurisdictions. Today, we want to give you an overview of a set of capabilities that have evolved to help you to apply GIS as a framework for racial equity. We'll provide some examples of how this applies specifically to state and local government, and we'll share some demos to help you to see GIS capabilities in action. Then we'll talk a bit about some of the upcoming updates, and finally we'll open the virtual floor up to questions and comments from the audience. But please don't hold your questions. Feel free to submit questions and comments all along the way, and we'll do our best to address them throughout the presentation, but we'll definitely spend some time at the end. And again, please take some time to share your needs through the survey that'll pop up when you exit the webinar. We really need that information to help guide what we're doing to help you. So I'll get started with an overview of how GIS can be used as a framework for racial equity. And that'll include a collection of guidance and capabilities to help organizations advance racial justice. So let's begin with guidance for applying a racial equity lens. As we all know, race and place matters. meaning people have different experiences and outcomes based upon their perceived racial identities and where they live, work, and get educated. However, we recognize that racial disparities do not begin and end with race and ethnicity. We know that inequities in experiences and outcomes come from the impact of policies, budget decisions, and programs on individuals and communities based on intersections of race, gender, language, religion, orientation, ability, socioeconomic status, and many other factors. So we provide data, tools, and guidance to help you to apply a racial equity lens to the experiences and outcomes that people have with the services, practices, and programs in your jurisdictions. You can also integrate GIS with best practice workflows for advancing racial equity and social justice. The racial equity workflow is a critical aspect of how to apply GIS as a framework for racial equity. The workflow is derived from emerging and best practices for advancing racial equity and social justice. Organizations working towards racial justice are always either implicitly or explicitly executing this cycle. We've simply infused these standard methods and practices with GIS best practices. And we recognize that equity leaders and department leaders across the organizations that you support need to better understand the wide range of challenges being experienced throughout their jurisdictions. And we want to help those leaders and the GIS teams who support them gain those insights. So the process begins with mapping and analyzing inequities, meaning enabling you to apply a racial equity lens through maps and spatial analysis to reveal and understand inequities in experiences and outcomes within your community, and locating populations of concern, identifying the barriers that they may face to equality, and supporting informed and equitable decision making. We know that there are people throughout your organizations that struggle to understand which policies and programs have created burdens for marginalized communities and to find the best opportunities to deliver more equitable outcomes. So the workflow continues with operationalizing best practices, meaning providing you with what you need to design and plan equitable allocations of resources to alleviate burdens on communities of color, and enhancing in the capabilities to enhance the delivery of your services for more racially equitable outcomes by using maps and spatial analysis and enabling you to collect the right location, demographic, and operational data that you need in order to support racial justice actions. We know that leaders across government want to ensure that their efforts are leading to the outcomes they expect. So the process includes a stage to help your leaders manage performance, meaning manage and analyze the performance of initiatives and services to understand and measure meaningful impact, leveraging decision-making tools to visualize racial inequities at a glance, so your organization can adapt strategies and operations accordingly. We also understand that it's important to ground truth your understanding of inequities, collaborate with partners, and provide space for constituents to voice concerns and perspectives. So the process encourages and supports your efforts to engage communities all throughout the process, meaning enabling you to engage communities and partners through storytelling, crowdsourcing, and sharing initiative-focused content to increase awareness, understanding, and collaboration on the racial inequities that your jurisdictions need to face. You can also leverage product and solution configuration guidance. We recognize that leaders in state, provincial, and local jurisdictions across the globe are challenged with addressing racial equity in the work that's happening across their organizations. They need tools and resources at their fingertips to inform decisions and actions and to ensure that their work is creating benefits for marginalized communities and not burdens. So we're delivering solutions that align with government workflows as well as product configuration guidance to help GIS teams deliver the right maps and apps to the right leaders at the right time. And finally, there's an envisioning process for enterprise-wide racial equity initiatives. We understand that many mayors, council members, county administrators, and a growing list of racial equity leads are working to organize and oversee racial equity initiatives and drive impact across the enterprise. So we're making available resources to facilitate the understanding of priorities, impact, and scope in a structured manner to create geospatial strategies that help your leaders orchestrate the delivery of GIS capabilities to drive racial equity throughout your jurisdictions. As you can see, Esri is providing a comprehensive set of GIS and location intelligence resources to support a broad range of racial equity and social justice related initiatives. And in many ways, these resources reflect the emerging and best practices for advancing racial equity and social justice that the leaders working in and around your organizations have been executing and evolving for many years. And we intend to continue to evolve the guidance and capabilities that we provide as your needs and your efforts to address racial equity evolve. And your input is critical to those efforts. So again, please don't forget to take the needs survey when you exit the webinar. Now I'll hand things over to my colleague, Jacqueline Scott, to talk about how Esri's racial equity capabilities apply specifically to state and local government.
Thanks, Clinton. This coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated racial inequities across countries worldwide. Here in the U.S., state and local governments continue to face this deadly virus. Massive budget cuts, closed schools and businesses, civil unrest spurred by weeks of protests prompted by the killing of George Floyd and other Black Americans. As a result, many leaders across the country are calling out racism as a public health crisis. By making these declarations, local leaders are formally acknowledging the role racism plays in healthcare, housing, the environment, policing, and access to food as a bold step, and in some cases, the very first step. These declarations are addressing a wide variety of systemic inequalities. We are seeing a trend of the top factors that led to these declarations: health disparities, public policy, public safety, social issues, environmental, and more recently, digital divide, the growing gap between demographics and regions that have access to modern information and communications technology and those that don't. Milwaukee County, Wisconsin takes credit for being the first with their May 2019 resolution. They were compelled to act because of a staggering health disparities in Wisconsin's most populous county, where almost 70% of the state's Black residents live. In June 2020, Wisconsin's Governor Tony Evers declared that inaction, indifference, and institutional racism has harmed generations of Black and brown Wisconsinites. Montgomery County, Maryland soon followed, adopting a resolution of their own stating that racism, a root cause of disparities and inequities, is a public health problem warranting action. According to the American Public Health Association, many jurisdictions have either passed or were considering declarations calling racism a public health crisis. Some notable outcomes are newly created equity positions, the forming of diversity and inclusion task forces or racial equity committees and forums. As you can see on this map, the list has grown to 134 jurisdictions, which include 5 states, 48 counties, and 81 cities, towns, villages, and boroughs. Earlier this year, we created a dashboard and a short survey to better understand those making these declarations and those considering it, understanding the challenges they are facing and how Esri can help. Several jurisdictions have already participated, and we welcome you to be a part of these efforts as well. At the end of the webinar, we will provide a survey for you to provide your input. We really look forward to hearing from you. Efforts to advance equity generally have 2 broad areas of focus: the community aspect, external, or organizational aspect, internal. We find it more effective to take a dual approach using the community-focused work to transform local government outreach and service delivery to the broader community. Organizational-wide efforts is more about transforming the local government workplace into a more inclusive, diverse, and equitable environment. Community examples are some things like formal task forces made up of community members, or holding a Citizens Police Advisory Committee, partnering with organizations like Race Forward and GARE the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Internal examples are completing organizational assessments, auditing services that the organization provides, creating an internal equity team, and reforming hiring practices, all using a racial equity lens. An internal best practice is to ensure your racial equity core teams have a blend of high-level leaders who have the authority to make the decisions and staff who can implement the work on a daily basis. When telling any story about racial inequities, ensure the people most impacted by inequities are engaged in crafting the narrative. And last but not least, using GIS as a framework for racial equity. Many are already addressing racism using parts of the racial equity workflow that Clinton referenced earlier. They are mapping and analyzing inequities by applying a racial equity lens to reveal and understand inequities in experiences and outcomes within their community. An example of this is the city of Los Angeles. They are looking to plant 90,000 trees by 2021 with a goal of expanding tree canopy across the city. Their data team investigated how to plant those trees equitably as a blueprint for other equity-based service delivery programs. Using data from Tree People, the city's nonprofit partner for tree planting, they began by studying existing tree canopy across the city. The first map displays the percentage of tree canopy by census tract level. They wanted to analyze significant clustering of trees and areas lacking trees. The deep green areas of the second map represent a significant cluster of trees across LA. The deep gray represents a significant lack of tree canopy. And the third map displays a concentration of heat island effects across the city. Urban heat island effect is when a city experiences much warmer temperatures than nearby rural areas. Some are operationalizing best practices by using maps, spatial analysis, and data to design, plan, and deliver equitable resource allocations that alleviate burdens on communities of color. Another example of this is the City of Charlotte, working with residents and Mecklenburg County to adopt permitting and zoning practices that take environmental justice into account. They say that without these in place, there is no consideration for the density of facilities or the proximity to vulnerable populations. The City of Oakland's Department of Race and Equity uses location intelligence to surface, share, and act on inequities that Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, face. The Oakland Department of Transportation, OCDOT, is in year 2 of a 3-year equity-focused paving plan, guided by the Department of Race and Equity. They use spatial analysis and data to discover how many people traveled on a street, asking questions like, who lived around that street? What facilities were around that street that provided services for these communities? Helping them determine what streets need to be prioritized and maintained. Or maybe you need to manage your racial equity performance. Leverage decision-making tools to visualize racial inequities at a glance to adapt new strategies and operations. Milwaukee County's COVID-19 dashboard keeps equity risk factors front and center. They built equity indicators into the dashboards used to monitor and make decisions. The dashboard displays authoritative case data along with breakdowns of cases and patient outcomes. More specifically, the dashboards total confirmed cases and reported deaths by race, gender, and age. Many state, county, and city governments are working to advance equity on all of these fronts in relationship to the broader community and within their organization. I've given you a few examples, but how will you engage with your community? Storytelling, crowdsourcing, and sharing initiative-focused content that increases awareness and collaboration is a great place to start. Esri's Racial Equity Community Outreach is the first set of tools released to support local government agencies in their efforts to communicate progress made on racial equity to the public. If you already have Esri software, then you have access to this solution today at no additional cost. When you deploy the Racial Equity Community Outreach solution, you get a series of ArcGIS applications used to communicate your key racial equity initiatives, visualize your workforce diversity metrics, and gauge public sentiment about racial equity. You can work toward and increase transparency, asking the important question, how are we doing? Share your authoritative information with the community, creating spaces and opportunities for those who live in the community to have their voices heard in naming the problem and offering solutions to the problems they face. To make real progress in reducing inequities, it will require communities to get out of silos. Consider starting with the Esri Community Outreach solution. Esri is working with customers across local governments to create new geospatial capabilities to advance racial justice. To that end, we are actively seeking organizations to pilot our racial equity solutions. The first being community outreach that I just mentioned. Then there's Police Transparency, released November 10th, just 2 days ago. And coming soon, business inclusion with a focus on BIPOC-owned businesses and the Racial Equity Learn Hub. If you're interested in participating in one or all of these pilot programs, please contact your Esri account manager for more details. Please fill out the survey at the end of this webinar. We really value your input. And now I will turn it over to Piali Kundu for a high-level overview of the solution.
Thank you, Jackie. The Racial Equity Community Outreach Solution provides a one-stop destination hub that can be used by local governments to communicate progress made on racial equity initiatives or programs to the general public and other interested stakeholders. The Community Outreach Solution includes a series of ArcGIS applications that are used to communicate key racial equity initiatives or programs, gauge public sentiment, report on workforce diversity metrics, and share authoritative information about racial equity with the community. Here I have a blog article that was released by the ArcGIS Solutions team that describes the solution in detail. As mentioned before, the solution is free and easily available through the new ArcGIS Solutions Hub. You can also access it easily from the Racial Equity Hub resources page. You can also search for racial equity in the Solutions Hub and select the Racial Equity Community Outreach card in order to start deploying the solution or to access documentation. To deploy the solution, click Get Now. You'll be prompted to sign in to your ArcGIS Online organization, and it'll take about a minute to create and load all the components. It's important to note that you do need to have ArcGIS Online in order to deploy this solution. Once the solution is deployed, you should be redirected to the solution item that is created in your contents and is used to organize the components of the solution. The solution contents section lists the items and their hierarchies, and you can use this section to easily navigate to any of the components. The items next to the components indicate what type of item it is, whether it's a site, a survey, feature services, dashboards, or tables. The Community Outreach Solution is comprised of several pre-configured ArcGIS app templates, including the Racial Equity Community Outreach site, which is an ArcGIS Hub Initiative template, the Racial Equity and Inclusion Community Survey, which is a configuration of ArcGIS Survey 123, and the Workforce Diversity Dashboard, which is a configuration of ArcGIS Dashboard. Let's explore each of these components, how they're configured, and how they come together. The Racial Equity Community Outreach Site is a responsive, accessible destination page for increasing awareness and communicating progress of racial equity programs and initiatives, which takes the form of an ArcGIS Hub initiative. This template provides several placeholder sections, including describing the overall mission statement and specific focus areas, at-a-glance key metrics and links to associated data sources to increase reporting transparency, links to data, apps, and surveys, which we'll cover in just a bit, and sections to describe or link to other programs, as well as any associated events and other important information like FAQs or relevant community partners. Users can also choose to follow the initiative to subscribe for future updates. The template is easy to configure and modify to meet your specific branding and layout needs using an intuitive drag and drop, what you see is what you get editor. It's extremely easy to add, remove, and edit components and adjust the overall theme and branding of the site. ArcGIS Hub also includes a lightweight event management system so that you can create and organize community engagement events under one initiative hub. The Community Outreach Initiative template includes two subpages, one tailored to engage on workforce diversity, and another with directions on how to configure the site, which can be deleted once the initiative is deployed. The Workforce page provides a simple template site for embedding and sharing the Workforce Diversity Dashboard and other associated resources like events and FAQs. Next, let's explore the data reporting capabilities of the Workforce Diversity Dashboard and its components. The Workforce Diversity Dashboard is a configuration of ArcGIS Dashboard designed to monitor workforce diversity metrics. The Summary tab provides high-level breakdowns of an institution's workforce based on race and compares it with the community makeup of that race to clearly indicate whether workforce composition reflects the composition of the surrounding community. And this information can be filtered by multiple departments or sectors if that information resides in your workforce data. The Details tab provides further breakdowns of the workforce age, race, and gender, years of service, elected appointment, and salary. The dashboard is powered by a hosted feature service that captures the key attributes feeding into the dashboard elements, including a role's title, department, hiring dates and years of service, demographic variables, salary, and elected appointed status. You can easily append your own data, your own workforce data into this service to populate the dashboard. But it's important to note that the dashboard and its data source can be modified to reflect your workforce data so that you can add and remove fields from the data and elements. Additionally, a hosted view of this data acts as an intermediary between the parent data set and allows you to control and filter which fields or elements you might want to keep. Finally, let's explore some data collection capabilities provided in the Community Outreach solution. The Racial Equity Community Outreach Solution also includes the Community Sentiment Survey, a configuration of ArcGIS Survey 123, which can be shared with your constituents or the general public to obtain feedback on racial equity initiatives or programs. The survey provides a template of general questions that can be posed, as well as examples of question formats, including single and multi-select questions, grid format questions and Likert styles, and other common question and answer formats. The Select Your Race question is a great example that shows how you can take a more racially diverse approach to collecting race data and including more race and ethnicity options. The Community Sentiment Survey was built using Survey 123's web builder, so you can edit the questions directly in the browser using a drag and drop editor. Or, as with all Survey 123 surveys, you can open the survey in Survey 123 Connect, which leverages XLS forms to allow you to build in extremely complex logic and even use JavaScript functions for more complex computing. You can also hook up surveys to webhooks using webhook providers like Microsoft Power Automate or Integromat to trigger additional processes when a survey is submitted, like automated emails. The Racial Equity Community Outreach Solution is built on configurable ArcGIS tools and builders, and you can use them in a variety of different ways. Some are outlined in the solution template, but you can really get flexible and creative with leveraging these different applications. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Raina to explore some other ways in which you can use these applications.
Thanks, Piali. Now that you have all seen what is freely available to deploy, I would like to take the next couple of minutes just to share with you or to show you how these applications within the community outreach solution can be extended. Now, there are several ways that you can get feedback from the community and really engage your constituents or the constituents in your jurisdiction. As Piali demonstrated, you are able to use a pre-configured survey within the solution, the community outreach solution. But I would like to take that a notch further. Now, a team of dedicated Esri staff integrated Survey 123 with Experience Builder to come up with what we called our sentiment application. Now, Experience Builder is a fairly new Esri app builder which actually empowers users to quickly transform data into compelling web apps without writing a single line of code. In Experience Builder, you can perform various operations such as drag and drop operations to choose the tools that you need from a rich set of widgets to design your own templates all within one application. And with it, the web apps actually look very great and run seamlessly on mobile devices. This was one of the major characteristics that we needed, especially with collecting feedback from the community. We also created our survey using Survey 123 and used the feature service that resulted in the survey results in our broader map. This map is actually what we would be serving in our final application. So the web map that you're seeing here is what you will see embedded within the Experience Builder application. And in here, we added the community sentiments feature service layer. We have the ACS poverty status variable layer, which is primarily symbolized just to show the percentage of population whose income falls below the federal poverty line. And this actually really helps because it helps provide a better understanding to the responses that you might be receiving from the survey or the ones for the questions that we're actually anticipating answers for in our final application. And we also have that USA states layer just to kind of help with providing the boundary information. So all these components were put together and they were integrated together to come up with our crowdsourcing sentiment application. Now, with this application, not only do stakeholders understand the impact of various initiatives within the community, but they're actually able to monitor outcomes with and gauge community sentiment. Now, within this application, there is a word cloud that you see here with sentiments and feelings that the community provided within the app. This word cloud helps provide a quick observation of the general sentiment of how a community feels about a topic. In this instance, we're talking about racial equity in health within the community. So it really helps provide that general sentiment about health and racial equity in health, and it helps us understand how these sentiments might vary across racial and gender identities to ensure a real racial equity lens is incorporated. Now with this app, you can click on a word, and with that, it will interact with the map to show the locations or the places within the community that share that particular sentiment. And like I said before, the poverty index layer has also been embedded to help provide a better understanding while translating these results. Now, not only can you just visualize the sentiments of the community, you're actually able to add your feeling or you can add your sentiment to the application. And what this does, once you fill out this survey, this application will update in real time. So when you click on add your feeling, you can click one word and express how you feel about health or racial equity in health within your community. You can provide more context about that feeling, why you feel the way you feel, add a location as a point of reference. And you'll also notice that this survey, just like Piali demonstrated, has been developed to incorporate a racial equity lens, just like the community outreach solution. So we have some various racial and social identifiers just to help provide some more context. Once you click on submit, you're able to get the word added into the map as well as the point added, the location added to the application. So this is just one of the many ways you can extend what is already freely available from our community outreach solution. Now, the next application that I wanted to share with everyone is this dashboard that we built using Operations Dashboard. And the metrics that you're seeing here are just being, the web map that you're seeing here is actually being updated on ArcGIS Online. So let's take a look at the web map that's actually serving this dashboard. This web map consists of various layers, including sample government office locations. And we also have the ACS race, which is the American Community Survey data layer, which is symbolized to show the predominant race living within a particular area. Now, this service is updated annually after every 5 years. We also have the state layer, which just helps provide some boundary information. And we also have the USA Diversity Index layer, which pretty much just summarizes, it's a layer that summarizes racial and ethnic diversity in the United States. So this diversity index just shows the likelihood that two persons chosen at random from the same area belong to different race or ethnic groups. And this diversity index ranges from 0, which is no diversity, to 100, which symbolizes complete diversity. Now, a point to note for this is that all these layers that you're seeing here are available if you have an ArcGIS Online subscription and if you have access to Living Atlas, which you should. Let's go back to the dashboard. Now, this solution primarily helps answer a couple of questions. One is, how are we actually doing in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion within our state and local workforce compared to the community? And also, where are the gaps in our state and local offices where we can improve our DNI index? So to the right of the dashboard, there's a chart that compares and contrasts the racial profile of a community to the office diversity profile. In essence, just trying to understand if government offices really reflect the diversity profile of the community that they are serving. And below here is a list of how the offices are doing in terms of equity score. Now, just a disclaimer, we mocked up the calculation to prove the capabilities of Esri software, but primarily these scores are created by calculating the ratio between outcomes for the least and most advantaged racial ethnic groups. Once this ratio has been identified, it's then converted to an equity score using an algorithm that a research institute came up with. And these scores are scaled from 0 to 100, and in our case, red to green, with red representing highest possible inequity and green representing highest possible equity. Now, this dashboard also shows you a chart that you can use to filter out the offices by their equity score. So for instance, if I want to take a look at the offices that are not performing very well in regards to racial equity, I can be able to filter that map out and maybe even take a further look as to why they're performing how they're performing. We also have a legend here. So for instance, we are looking at an office in Alabama, and looking at the legend, we're able to tell that the area that this office is serving is predominantly Black. Yet while we look at the government office diversity profile, we see that the staff is made up of predominantly a white staff. So these are just some quick examples of how you can extend the applications within the solutions. And now I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Clinton to go ahead with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Raina. We also want to let you know about an opportunity to share your organization's racial equity and social justice stories. We're on the last day of a call for presentations for next year's Esri User Conference. This year, like last year, equity and social justice is included in the presentation topic. We encourage you all to submit abstracts for your jurisdiction's work related to racial equity and social justice, whether you're working on criminal justice reform, racial equity in policing, housing and economic development, environmental justice, or equity in the context of so many other topics like health, education, transportation. Submit your work today. All you need is some basic contact information, a title, a brief description. That's 500 words or less, just a couple of paragraphs, and you'll be on your way. Just bear in mind that the deadline for submission is tomorrow, November 13th. So how do we help you get started with all of the stuff that Raina and Piali just shared? You can start by visiting the Racial Equity website at go.esri.com/racial equity, where you can learn more about applying a racial equity lens and the racial equity workflow. And don't worry, these links will be provided at the end. This site includes resources to help you get started with solutions like the Racial Equity Community Outreach solution that you heard about today. You'll find the Racial Equity GIS Hub that we talked about a bit, that has data layers, user examples, and learning resources. That includes a new solution for police transparency to help jurisdictions working to increase racial equity in policing. You can also get connected to a growing community of GIS users that are applying the geosciences and ArcGIS capabilities to the important work of equity and social justice. So while we've all been presenting, Margot's been compiling your questions, and she'll help us read through some of those right now. Margot?
Hello, everybody. Yeah. Some great questions coming in. The first one is, how can I get the Racial Equity Community Outreach solution?
Jackie, do you want to handle that?
Yes, so we definitely are providing the resource with the link. You can definitely download that from the Racial Equity Hub. We'll be sharing those links as well, I think in chat. Margot mentioned she was going to share that in chat. So there's no delay. You can get started today.
Wonderful. And we had another question that came in. Instead of displaying workforce data, can you use the dashboard, I believe the dashboard that Piali was showing, to publish other metrics?
Well, the short answer is yes, but yeah, Piali?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, so the dashboard and the data source that is feeding into the dashboard are all configurable. So you can, edit the data source to reflect your metrics, and you can edit the components of the dashboard as well.
Thank you. Another question that came in is this available on ArcMap?
I can help answer that question. So the solution, the community outreach solution, is primarily available. It's all web-based, and so most of the deployment and workflow initiated tasks would be online. So unless you are talking about publishing data as feature services to be consumed via an ArcGIS Online web map, that's completely possible. But everything, most of the tasks or most of the configuration is done online. So to answer that question, it's all workflow based, and it's all dependent on the data that you want to serve the web map. So if you have data on ArcMap and you want to publish that on ArcGIS Online, that's completely possible.
Thanks, Raina. I also wanted to answer quickly one of the most popular questions, which is, will this webinar be recorded and shared? The answer is yes. So I think before you leave, just know that if you that you will be receiving a link to the recorded webinar at the end of the session within the week. Let's see, let's look at some other questions. Where can I submit the abstract for the User Conference 2021? And do I need to be affiliated with a company to qualify?
We can get the URL and drop it in the chat, but you can go to Esri's website, search for the user conference, and there should be a link to quickly get you there. There is a field that asks for organization. I'm not sure that it's required that you're a part of an organization. Definitely feel free to submit, and we'll work through it.
Thanks, Clinton. I also provided the link in the chat in response to that question. Here's a great question. How do you get top-level officials to start thinking of GIS as a part of the racial equity solution? Our local government created an office of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's all policy people, and GIS is not viewed as part of IT and not applicable. That's the question. Do you have any thoughts on that, team?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of local government agencies are having those same thoughts. I mentioned it's a best practice to actually have the high-level officials that make the policy and make decisions, but also to have staff able to do the work, to actually create the maps, to get the data. So if you want, you can tell them I said so, but it is a best practice because you want that high-level, those high-level staff members in the meeting, but you also want the ones who can actually do the work.
Yeah, great,
And there are lots
question.
of organizations. Yeah, I was gonna say there's lots of organizations like yours across the globe that are doing this work, and we will continue to do our best to find examples of how organizations have applied racial equity to their business workflows, and so maybe you'll find something in the Racial Equity Resources Hub, GIS Hub, that'll exemplify how your organization can pull racial equity into context in some department-specific work.
Great. Someone else had a question. Do we have any thoughts on adding LGBTQIA+ into these applications? And I think that was maybe in reference to the survey and ways people can self-identify.
Which survey? The surveys that configurable surveys? Oh yeah. So we get you started with some baseline, and the presenters walk through some examples of some baseline configurations. But racial equity is about a comprehensive set of racial identities that includes someone's orientation, their gender, their perceived orientations and genders. So yeah, if your organization, if your jurisdiction is focusing on an issue that relates to social equity as it pertains to LGBTQIA+ status, then yes, configure your survey tool accordingly. We'll work to uncover standard practices for how people put those kinds of questions together and display it. You all could help us by sharing what you learn and what you do in that GeoNet community that we've provided a link to.
I think this other question was, I believe, came in when Piali was doing her demonstration. This person says, curious about the back end for data and contacts. Are only ArcGIS-based data sources able to display, or can this solution tie in to external sources such as Tableau, Power BI, and how are the contacts for surveys managed? There's a few questions in one. Let me know if you need to repeat.
Yes, I can start answering that question. So the particular solutions you see here are hooked up to hosted feature services, and those hosted feature services can be based off of a multitude of different data sources. You can upload CSVs, shapefiles, Excel spreadsheets, things like that, to create the feature services. In terms of tying in external products such as Tableau or Power BI, I guess if you have some sort of a dashboard that's built in Tableau or Power BI, then you could embed that content. I hope I'm understanding that question correctly. In terms of how contacts are for the surveys are managed, it depends on how you configure the survey. So I think the example survey, it doesn't require someone to necessarily put their first and last name in there, but those are parameters that you can add into the survey if you didn't want the survey to be anonymous. So those are a few ways in which contacts could be managed that way.
Thanks, Piali. Someone else asked, will there be a list of projects and entities available to those who would like to volunteer or collaborate with their efforts?
We have our this is Jackie. We have our solutions team that are asking for this help from the community and from our customers. So I'm sure they have a running list, but they look for different organizations throughout the country to work with. I would say first come, first serve. They really want those good use cases up front to be a part of these pilot projects so we can actually display those examples on the Racial Equity Hub.
All right, thanks, Jackie. And here's another question. Someone who is very new to GIS, so thank you for joining. We're glad you're here. They asked, will there be data already loaded and also constantly updated in ArcGIS?
This is Reina. Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, so for instance, most of the prototypes or the racial equity solutions that we are developing and prototyping are actually consuming some living atlas data. So there's freely available data such as the poverty status variables, diversity index, and all these are available on ArcGIS Online Living Atlas. So it's one of those layers that you can, if you are on your ArcGIS Online web map interface, you should be able to add content and just go to the Living Atlas gallery, and all this data is preloaded. To answer the question about how often they get updated, I know, for instance, the ACS data, the ACS information or data that serves the Living Atlas layer typically gets updated about every 5 years, but this is information that is provided in the description of that item. So if you want to add like a poverty status variables layer within the map, there is an item details page, and it actually tells you where the data is coming from and how often the service is updated.
Thank you, Raina. Someone else asked a question. When you say that the hub site can be shared privately, does that mean that you can share with a few select users in your organization, even if they don't have an ArcGIS online account?
In order to share with privately with a select group of people in your organization, you would leverage groups in ArcGIS Online in order to share the components to that group. However, those individuals would need to have a login to your organization to access.
All right, thanks, Piali. And I think we maybe have time for just one or two. Let's see, where did it go? Someone asked about the police transparency hub site. And is there a cost for hosting a hub page? I'm not sure if that was two separate questions. I can respond to the first one. I'll put a link in there to an entire other webinar on the police transparency solution, so you can watch that. But does someone want to take the question about whether there's a cost for hosting a hub page?
As part of it, we also have the Esri Open Data, which is no cost. So that's Hub Basic, and they have access to that today.
Perfect. And I think that leads into the question about, someone asked about Hub Premium. Does this require Hub Premium?
Yeah, thanks, Margot. It's a frequently asked question. So the difference between Hub Premium and Hub Basic is just primarily about functionality. So for most of the functionality that Piali was demonstrating, such as having sites and pages for community engagement, those are all available with Basic. Now, when you want to take a look into, or you want to incorporate event management system like she demonstrated, that functionality would require a premium license. And we also have a link, and I think we can share that with the attendees, that primarily just breaks down the functionality differences between what's offered with basic and premium. So some of the functionality can be available with basic, and looking at some other functionality, you might not be able to get that without the premium license.
All right. Thank you very much. I think that's the last question we probably have time for. We only have a couple minutes left. Someone did ask, how can I stay up to date on all of these different resources and new solutions that are coming out? And I wanted to respond to that by pointing to the chat. I just copied and pasted a list of links to everything that we discussed today. And the most important link is that first one, which is go.esri.com/racial equity. And as everything else gets updated, it all goes there. That's kind of the central landing point. So if you want to know at any point what's new, what's coming out from Esri's racial equity team, you can check there moving forward. So I think that's all the questions we have time for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I did want to reiterate that after the webinar, you all will receive an email within the week with a link to the recording of today's session. Again, please also fill out the survey that will pop up after you leave the webinar. Finally, don't forget to go to go.esri.com/racial equity to find all of the resources we discussed today. And again, they're also in the chat. And as always, if you need any help, you can reach out to your Esri account manager. So thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.